Welcome to my presentation on the Michigan tablets. This one is specifically entitled How to Read Reformed Egyptian. It is the same presentation that I presented at the Firm Foundation Book of Mormon Expo in Orem, Utah on April 7th, 2017. I have multiple sources. Some of them were informational or historical, but other ones had to do with the ancient Hebrew language and the ancient Egyptian language. I used them as references in trying to decipher the language. The agenda today, we will go over some of my findings at Hidden Mountain, some of the Egyptian characters that I found, as well as we will go over how to decipher the writings on certain tablets, such as the tablet on Noah, the Tower of Babel, King Solomon, and other artifacts that were found that are part of the Michigan tablets. Now, the first question I ask is, well, why do we care about Egyptian? So why am I focusing on Egyptian in this presentation? And so I'd like to point out a scripture from the Book of Mormon in Mosiah chapter 1, and this is regarding the brass plates. For it were not possible that our father Lehi could have remembered all these things, to have taught them to his children, except it were for the help of these plates. For he, having been taught in the language of the Egyptians, therefore he could read these engravings and teach them to his children, that thereby they could teach them to their children, and so fulfilling the commandments of God, even down to this present time. So based on this scripture, we know that the brass plates were not written in Hebrew. They were actually written in Egyptian. Therefore, it was critical that the Nephites continued to teach their children how to read Egyptian. An introduction of myself. My name is Brian Nettles. I served a mission for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints in Hong Kong back 1983 through 85. That was a long time ago now. I graduated from Brigham Young University and the University of Utah, served in the Army for about 8 years, and I currently work as a computer programmer. Now, it was almost exactly a year ago when I had recently finished reading the Book of Mormon in Chinese using the simplified Chinese character set for the first time. And at the time, that was a major milestone for me. It was also about this time when I had actually watched a movie by an anti-Mormon movie on the Book of Abraham, where the producers of the movie, their sole intent was to discredit the prophet Joseph Smith. And at this time, I was actually disturbed by some of the contents of the movie. And as I went home that night and I knelt down and prayed that night, as I often do, I felt the inspiration of the Holy Ghost whisper to me, learn to read Egyptian. And so that was why I picked up the books on Egyptian and started learning how to read that language. Well, about 5 months into this was on Labor Day last year, where I was visiting my parents in Albuquerque, New Mexico. And having recently learned of the Los Lunas Decalogue stone, I decided to take my son and my wife, and we went to the Decalogue stone near Los Lunas at Hidden Mountain. We took a bunch of pictures there, and then me and my son went exploring. And when we got towards the top of the trail, I looked to my left. I couldn't believe what I was looking at. A petroglyph that had Native American symbols, which at the time I did not know what they meant. And then as I looked down below, I saw 4 Egyptian symbols. All 4 symbols are straight out of the book of Collier and Manley, How to Read Egyptian. You can see next to the red arrow, you've got the I, which means to make. You've got next to the blue arrow, you can see a W in there, and that actually means mountains, maker of the mountains. And then by the green arrow, you can see the triangle. That means either give or place. And then on the orange arrow, you could see the commonly known Ankh symbol, which means life. So as I continued to research this, as I went home, I researched the Native American symbols, and what I learned was that the eagle is well, first of all 3 of these symbols are they stem from the Mississippi Valley. Now the eagle, it's said that when the Native Americans wanted to send a message to the sun, they sent the eagle, as the eagle was the only creature able to fly high enough. And so as I learned this, I concluded that the eagle represents prayer. I'm going to skip the swastika for now and come back to that in a moment. The Thunderbird, that simply means the power of thunder and lightning and war. Now, as we get back to the swastika, what I found interesting is that as I looked at the Native American websites that give meaning to what their symbols meant, I actually could not find a good definition. But this is what I did find. There is something called the feathered serpent symbol, and you can see the image right here, where you've got a circle with a cross, and you have 4 serpents, feathered serpents, and their heads are all up against the circle, with the bodies of the serpents making the arms of the swastika. And as I look at this, to me, it is reminiscent of Moses lifting his staff up with the brazen serpent on it, which signifies the Savior or the Messiah. If you remember your history, the Aztecs, they also had a meaning for the feathered serpent. The feathered serpent actually was a reference to Quetzalcoatl. Therefore, I take this to mean that the feathered serpent or the swastika actually is a reference to the Messiah or the Savior. So bringing the 3 top symbols together, I see that it means pray that the Messiah will give us the power of thunder and lightning and war. As far as the bottom 4 symbols, as I originally translated this, it meant maker of the mountain which gives life. As I continue to further research and contemplate what it actually means, especially after going through the Michigan tablets, I changed my translation to God's mountain, the place of life or the place of resort. Now, when you get to the top of the mountain, you could see that this is what was meant by a place of resort, is that when the people were being attacked, the people from the city would need to take a place of resort by going up into the top of this mountain, and you could see this very large gathering place. As you look along the edge of the mountain, you could see here where the people were probably living, growing their crops, living peacefully. And here's the other side of the mountain. Now, when you get up there and you're looking down the cliffs, you will notice that it's very steep. About 350 degrees of this mountain is very steep, very loose and slippery rock. And I would sure hate to be an attacker trying to traverse or trying to go up this mountain. The only way to get up it safely is by the trail. I also noticed at the top of the mountain, there are several of these. These are the 2, what I would say, defensive fighting positions or lookout posts that these are in the best condition. The rest of them are very old and very broken down. I have to ask the question are these ancient or are they not ancient? They seem to be in very good condition. I do not know if they're ancient or not, but it sure fits the paradigm that they had lookout posts along the edge of the top of the mountain to protect them from enemies that were coming to get them. Okay, so now let's get to the history of the Michigan tablets. I'm not going to go over the history here. I just want to tell you quickly what they are. And if you want to know more about the history, I plan to make another video that will specifically talk about the history of the Michigan tablets. Well, anyways, they're possible Native American artifacts found in digs in 17 counties in Michigan. They were found mostly between the 1860s and the 1920s. There was at one time 7 different collections that existed. They are mostly made out of clay, slate, and copper. The artifacts number between 10,000 and 30,000 items. However, only about 1,000 of the objects have strange writings, as you can see on the one artifact that's shown on this slide. Now, before I go on and talk about the dating, I also want to point out it is important specifically for people who are members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. You may know who James Talmage is. James Talmage, he was actually invited to participate in the digs of the Michigan tablets. There were 4 individuals that were engaged in doing the digs of the so-called Soper and Savage collection, which is what these artifacts came out of. And James Talmage, he took some of the artifacts back to Salt Lake City and analyzed them in his lab. He thought that there was something fishy going on. He made 3 trips back to Michigan, and he concluded that the entire thing was one big fraud. One of the other things that he obtained that he did not publish in his findings back in 1911 was that there was the stepdaughter of James Scotford, the uneducated man, James Scotford. Um, his stepdaughter basically made a sworn statement with James Talmage, stating that she knew for a fact that he was manufacturing artifacts, planting them, and digging them up on demand, only to proclaim them as being ancient historical artifacts. And so it's for those that are familiar with the history of these artifacts, there's good reason for them to be controversial. It's possible that all of them are fraudulent. However, we are going to examine the writings of these artifacts, and then you will be able to make your own determination as to whether or not you think they are fraudulent or not. It's also very possible that some are fraudulent and some are not fraudulent. As far as the dating of these artifacts, David Allen Deal did a lot of research on the Michigan tablets, and he found this particular calendar stone, which has astronomical events on it. And because of the astronomical events, he used computer simulations to figure out when these events would have occurred in the state of Michigan, and it took him back to 352 AD. And what is interesting is that those that believe in the Heartland model, put out by Wayne May and Rod Meldrum, the area of Michigan would have been considered the land of desolation, and the Nephites would only have populated this area after the time of Jesus Christ's visitation to the Americas. And so 352 AD is very consistent with this model. Now, David Deal also went to Los Lunas, New Mexico, and he found a calendar stone in Los Lunas, and he dated that to 107 BC, which puts that time period in with the early times of the Book of Mosiah, which would mean that after the Nephites were pushed out of the land of Nephi, while the majority of them went north, some of them must have gone west. With the Michigan tablets, many of them have this common symbol known as the mystic symbol. Now, the first time I heard of the mystic symbol, it was listening to a presentation done by Wayne May, probably at the Firm Foundation Expo a few years ago. And he talked about a time when he was giving a presentation in Michigan, and some Native American Ojibwe were there. And one of them approached him after the presentation and said to him, "That's our symbol. It means Yod He Vav, and it means our God." Well, Wayne May, he went home and he wrote off a letter to some Hebrew scholars, simply giving them the symbol and asking them if they knew what it was. You know, it's the slanted line, the H, and the vertical line, Yod He Vav. And both scholars came back to him saying it is Yod He Vav, it is Tetragrammaton, the name of God. Now, when I first heard this, I was actually confused about what the meaning of Tetragrammaton was, for I actually thought that it was a variant of cuneiform, which it is not. It is actually simply the writing of God's name in Hebrew, and the oldest known inscription of Tetragrammaton dates to 840 BCE on the Merneptah Stele. And as you could see on the right in the red box, if you knew Paleo Hebrew, you would know that this says Yod He Vav He, which is Jehovah. Now, the mystic symbol is three symbols, Yod He Vav. It does not include the He at the end. So as I continued to further research, what I discover is Yod He is the same thing as Yahweh, which is God as spoken of in the creation. Yod He Vav He, of course, is Jehovah. Now, if you've ever heard of the Bat Creek Stone, you hear that the Hebrew scholars translate the Bat Creek Stone as being for the Judeans, Yod He Vav Tav, which means Judean. Now, as I looked up Yod He Vav in the dictionary, in the Hebrew dictionary, I come to learn that it is not in the Hebrew dictionary. However, the word Vav has an ancient meaning of a tent stake. So in a sense, you could say that a translation of Yod He Vav is actually the stake of God. However, in the Michigan tablets, what I've found is that the Vav consistently appears to have the meaning of a person. Therefore, I give a different translation of the mystic symbol. I believe that it means the people of God. Now, I find several references in the Book of Mormon to the people of God. Mosiah 25:24, and they were called the people of God. Mosiah 26:5, and they were not half so numerous as the people of God. Alma 1:24, they were remembered no more among the people of God. I really like Alma 2:11 because it says, and the remainder were called Nephites, or the people of God. So you can see that the people of God is another way of referencing Nephites. I'd also like to point out in 4th Nephi 1:40, which is after the time that Jesus Christ had visited the people. It says, and they became more numerous than were the people of God. So therefore, the term the people of God was still being used. And I cannot help but wonder if perhaps in the Book of Mormon, where it has people of God, if the word people should actually be capitalized, as it appears to be a title. I mentioned earlier the Back Creek Stone. You notice that the to the right of the black box is the Lamed, which means four. Then you can have Yod He Vav. The question really comes down to the symbol which is after Yod He Vav. It's either a Tav or a Dalet. I'm not sure. It's kind of like in between. And then another letter after it. And what we don't know is if the Tav or Dalet belongs to Yod He Vav. And if it does, then it probably means Judeans. However, if the Tav or Dalet actually belongs to the next word, which is broken off from the stone and we can't tell what it is, then in reality, the Back Creek Stone says, for the people of God. Now, another common symbol used in the Michigan tablets, I'll call it heaven with two ticks on the right or two ticks on the left. And you can see with the orange yellow in the middle, and this pointing to the sixth commandment in the 10 Commandment stone, is that you have the symbol of heaven, which is actually very similar to the Egyptian symbol of heaven, as you can see next to the blue arrow. And then, as I said, two ticks on the right or two ticks on the left. In this case, with the orange arrow, it's two ticks on the right. Now, if you look at the other artifact where you've got Miriam pushing off the baby Moses, she has the symbol of heaven with two ticks on the right. And then when the daughter of the Pharaoh with her handmaiden go out to retrieve the baby Moses, the two ticks are on the left of the heaven symbol. As I had contemplated the meaning of this symbol, I was driving home from the airport one night listening to the Book of Mosiah, and I come to Mosiah chapter 5, King Benjamin speaking, and it shall come to pass that whosoever doeth this shall be found at the right hand of God. For he shall know the name by which he is called, for he shall be called by the name of Christ. And now it shall come to pass that whosoever shall not take upon him the name of Christ must be called by some other name. Therefore, he findeth himself on the left hand of God. Another definition for the symbol, I think, is righteousness or wickedness. Now, another symbol that is common is the eye. As I've said before, in Egyptian, it means to make or to see. In Hebrew, it could become a phonetic O sound. However, once again, I was driving in the car, listening to the Book of Mormon, this time in 2 Nephi chapter 9, where Jacob is talking, and he says, I pray the God of my salvation that he view me with his all-searching eye. And it kind of hit me when I heard that verse, and I thought, well, that I believe that the eye references the all-searching eye. Another common symbol in the tablets is water. And the water symbol it's exactly the Egyptian water symbol, which means two. It's also a phonetic N, and sometimes it is used as an indicator of past tense. Another symbol that is commonly used, the symbol for house, it usually looks more like the Egyptian variant, which is at the bottom, where you have the rectangle and the opening on the bottom. However, in the Michigan tablets, usually the opening's on the top, but not always. Sometimes it is on the bottom. Now, commonly in Egyptian, as you can see where you see, it says the voice offering from the Stela of Jeti, where you see the house symbol, and then you have all of the items that are placed inside of the house. And this is the voice offering, and so it is what they are offering to their gods. And they're basically saying inside this burial container, we're adding all of these items, 1,000 breads and kegs of beer and 1,000 ox and 1,000 geese and other items. So now we have a short dictionary here, God the Father, the eye, the people of God for the mystic symbol, right hand of God or righteousness, 2 or past tense for the water symbol, and house. Okay, now let's look at this tablet. This is one of the Michigan tablets coming from the Rudolf Etzenhauser collection. This is a deluge tablet. You can see that you have people that look like they're in the water. Then you see the Noah, the ark, Noah's ark, and next to the ark, you could see, if you can see right here, it looks like the dove carrying the olive branch. To the right and to the left, you have some grid squares, and these grids all count up to 40 grids, so representing the 40 days and 40 nights of the rains. And then at the bottom, you have the ark that is resting, and the animals are coming out of the ark, and the people are cheering. Now, as we look closer at this tablet, you can see in the top section, you have the symbol of house or container, and next to it, you have animals and the righteous. Now, this next symbol, this next image that you see here, the one that's in the gold color, I believe that this is the family of Noah. The reason I believe it is the family of Noah is because what's not shown here is the image to the left of the family, which is another inscription of the ark. And so now we have Noah's family, and you'll notice that next to Noah, it actually has his name written using the tooth comb symbols and the Hebrew O sound. And then you'll notice that the son on the right, the largest one, I believe that is Shem, and then in the middle it's Ham and Japheth. Now I want to point out that Ham in Hebrew is actually Cham, and Japheth in Hebrew is actually more like Epeth. Okay, and so now we have symbols representing their names. You'll also notice that next to the symbol, the first symbol, the tooth comb symbol of their name, each of the 3 sons have the same symbol. So I believe that it means son Ham, son Shem, son Ham, and son Japheth. So I've written down these symbols down below for you to see them, so you could see the symbol for son and the phonetic symbol of Shem, which I believe is simply an SH. And it seems like they're writing these names in shorthand. They're only putting the first sound of the name. Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Now notice, let's go look at the Etzenhauser image of Noah. And if you notice how he's standing in the second section to the right, he has his arms extended and his leg extended. And I believe that's actually word art going on here, because his arms are making the 2 symbols, the 2 horizontal lines from his name, and his leg making the leg of the tooth comb symbol. So you now have Noah standing there in the position making an N with his body. And you'll notice towards the top, you've got the 2 gray arrows at the top pointing to the symbol of sun, and also pointing to, it's kind of faded, you can't see it very well, the N symbol plus the Hebrew O, making the name Noah. At the bottom, you could see the symbol for son or sons. So now we've increased our dictionary here. So we have some phonetics of some of these symbols now. And unfortunately, as far as what these symbols mean, this doesn't really tell us a whole lot, because say like the name Japheth, you probably will discuss Japheth once every 4 years when you're talking about Noah in the gospel doctrine class of Sunday school. Okay, so now we've got a 10 Commandments copper tablet. Once again, this is part of the Rudolf Etzenhauser collection, and it was included in his pamphlet that he published in 1910 or 1911. And it is believed to be the 10 Commandments. And when I saw that gave me some excitement, because I'm thinking, okay, now I've got a Rosetta Stone. So what I did with this tablet is I basically did some research on it. The Los Lunas Decalogue stone, you'll notice I have a snippet here, or a screenshot of the Los Lunas Decalogue stone, where T. Eaton, a Hebrew scholar, would go to the stone and he would read it in Hebrew, and interpret it word for word. And he would analyze certain interesting facets about the stone. So basically what I did at this time is I reviewed his movies and his readings. I also learned enough Hebrew to look up words in the dictionary. I compared the Ten Commandments to the modern Hebrew dictionary and looked word for word, basically looking for patterns of sentence structure to see how these things may lay out. When I got to the fourth commandment, the first thing that I noticed on the fourth commandment was that the first symbol is the phonetic SH from the name Shem. And if you remember what the fourth commandment was, the fourth commandment is remember the Sabbath to keep it holy. So I decided to compare, well, what about the symbols after the SH? And how do you say Sabbath in Hebrew? Well, the answer to how you say Sabbath in Hebrew is Shabbat. And so I decided to compare the word Shabbat from the Los Lunas Decalogue stone to what we have here. And you'll notice that with the blue arrows, we have the phonetic SH in both Paleo Hebrew from the Los Lunas Decalogue stone, as well as the phonetic SH coming from the name Shem on our Michigan tablet. And then with the red arrow and the orange arrow, you have a matching B and T. They're not a perfect match, but I just can consider the concept of how many ways can you draw an A in the English language. So I believe we now here have Shabbat spelled out. Unfortunately, it's the only word in the Ten Commandments that really seems to make full use of the Hebrew letters and the Hebrew alphabet. The most of the symbols in here seem to be symbol matching to a word as opposed to spelling out a word. Now notice also the green arrow. That green arrow I found in the Noah tablet. It's actually twice in the Noah tablet. And so you think, okay, so what would the word be that comes after Shabbat? And well, to me, it must be remember, because the commandment was remember the Sabbath. So looking at the Noah tablet here, you could see in the middle, as I said, you could see that remember symbol there. And at the bottom, you could see the remember symbol next to the sun symbol. So I guess you could say that the bottom says the sun's remembered. We'll get back to that later when we translate the rest of this tablet. In fact, at this point, we have enough information to translate everything except for one of the symbols on the top line. So we'll come back to this tablet after we learn what that symbol is in the top line that we don't yet know. So I get to the third commandment, and as you can see, I've circled words here and written in values as to what they think they are. And so as I was going through the process of learning this, as I mentioned, I compared it to the different variants of the Ten Commandments in Hebrew and in English, and trying to see what kind of patterns I could find. I also took the symbols that I circled and I compared it to other commandments in the not the Los Lunas stone, but in this Michigan Tablets 10 Commandments plate. And I actually found that the term speak using the Noah symbol seems to fit quite nicely in several of the commandments. The symbol that I've written down for God is the symbol for Japheth. Now, if you recall, the name Japheth is actually Yepeth, which it starts with a phonetic Y, or the Hebrew Yud. And the Hebrew Yud is the same symbol that is used for the name Yahweh, Yod-He, or Yod-He Vav-He, Yahweh Va, Jehovah. And that is why it makes sense that the symbol with 3 horizontal strokes and a leg actually means God. The name, the symbol for that I've circled as named or called, that's basically, once again, I've cross-referenced that to other commandments, and it seems to fit quite nicely there. In fact, I've cross-referenced it to other tablets and other writings within the Michigan tablets, and it is a common symbol used here. I'd also like to point out that it's in William Tompkins' Indian Sign Language. He basically said it's not customary to ask, what is your name? Because it has a different way of asking this. What are you called? So named or called are the same word. I've been told by several people that Spanish is the same way. So now I'm adding to my dictionary here. So I've got a value for called and don't and not and Jehovah and speak. And these will show to be very helpful as we continue on. Now we have this artifact on the creation. So we have God standing over the earth. He's doing something. I'm not really certain what he's doing here. As you look at the earth, you will see that there are birds, fishes, animals already on the earth. Now, as you look at the writings, you see the eye there. And so the first thing I noticed when I saw that, I'm thinking, okay, well, that means God. And then I noticed below the eye is the symbol for sun. And so, well, I'm thinking logically that the symbol for sun probably belongs to the first line, but I'm seeing it probably belongs to the second line, but I'm looking at that and I'm thinking, well, maybe that means the Son of God, and it was simply written down below the eye, not meaning to be on the second line. But let's continue with this. So the Son of God, and then I have two symbols which I don't know. So he's doing something, and then the last symbol on the first line is called. The Son of God is doing something on what is called, and then I have this new symbol down below, the half circle with three vertical lines in it. So I'm thinking, well, that means called earth. The Son of God is doing something on what is called earth. And then the next symbol means speak or said, and he said it was good. And so the last symbol of the second line probably means good. Remember, we're always reading right to left. Now, I haven't really cross-referenced the word good in the other tablets and writings. However, the symbol for earth, that is very well cross-referenced. I'm very convinced that does indeed mean earth. I also find it very interesting that I found this symbol in Jeff Benner's book on the ancient Hebrew language and alphabet. It is a symbol, it is a Kaph or a K symbol. And as I said, it translates to earth in the Michigan tablets. I'd like to just quickly give my theory on the Michigan usage of God, as I believe that the eye is really a reference to God the Father. The tooth comb symbol for Japheth, I believe, means God, Jehovah. It could potentially be used to mean Jesus. For the swastika, that means the Messiah, the Savior, the Christ. Okay, now we're back to the Noah tablet. We now know all of the symbols, and we're ready to translate it. On the first line, remember you have the picture of Noah, but next to his feet you have God's earthly container for the animals and the righteous. Now you go down to the third line where you have the boat. I see our righteous Father remembered. And what did he remember? As I look, I had to look closely at this symbol because the top of the remember symbol bleeds into the post. But I actually believe that this is the symbol for Noah. I think it's saying our righteous Father remembered Noah. And then at the bottom, it says the sons remembered. What is it that the sons remembered? The sons remembered the righteous Father, and that is why they were spared in the flood. Now we get to the 9th commandment. I want to point out that when it comes to the 10 commandments, the first 5 commandments are very long. They're lengthy, and on this plate, they completely take up the 2 lines that they're allotted. However, you get to the second 5 commandments, 6 through 10, they're very short. And so they tended to use a lot of space takers as they were writing down these commandments. And so what I really want you to focus on is where I have speech and false or corrupted. But just to go through it real quickly, what I believe that this is saying is God's people, when called before others, the people of God, God forbids false or corrupted speech. Those called God's people speak words of righteousness. And so this commandment actually, when brought into English, is thou shalt not bear false witness against thy neighbor. So don't corrupt your testimony when called before others. Okay, so now we've got 2 tablets of the Tower of Babel. And once again, I wanted to point out speech and false or corrupted. that I found on the ninth commandment. Now, as we look at the gray image, the gray picture, there were some things that stood out to me. At the top, usually these tablets would have Yod He Vav, the mystic symbol there. But this one only has He Vav. And so that threw me a little bit. I'm wondering, well, why just He Vav? Also, you notice that the people standing on the tower have their arms raised as though they are rejoicing or they're happy or they're excited about something, which seems inconsistent about the Tower of Babel. Why would they be excited about something that was happening when something bad was happening? At the bottom, you have the bird, the seditious bird that is confusing the languages of the people. Now, in the top right of the gray tablet, you have the tooth comb symbols, and I believe that these are phonetics now, BBLL, to spell out Babel. Then you have the righteous remember, okay? And so in some ways, this tablet doesn't make sense to me, at least not at first. Then I look at the second tablet, and this one is from the Rudolf Etzenhauser collection again, and it's very grainy. It's really hard to see anything in it. However, I did notice that towards the bottom, there's some writings. And so I decided to see if I could make out the writings. And what I see is you could see the blue and the gray arrows pointing down to speech, false or corrupted. Their language was corrupted. That's what that says. Oh, go back. Okay, now next to language is corrupted, next I see HVAV. And so I'm wondering, so what are the HVAV? And then as I did some more research, this is what I found out. We oftentimes think of Abraham as being the first Hebrew. However, this is not the case. GodQuestions.org says the origin of the word Hebrew is thought to come from the proper name Eber. And Eber was the great-great-grandson of Shem and was an ancestor of Abraham. BehindTheName.com says a variant to the name Eber is Heber, and a Hebrew is one who crossed over from death to life, crossed over into a covenant with God, however you want the word crossed over to mean. I also found it interesting that as I was driving to Utah for the conference, I was listening to James E. Talmage's book, The Articles of Faith, and he taught this very same concept in his book, that Abraham was not the first Hebrew, Eber was the first Hebrew. So I believe that the HVAV means Hebrews. The Hebrews were called something. The green arrow points to the symbol called. Well, what is it that they were called? As I looked at the last symbol, I was wondering if I could find that in the 10 Commandments, and I did find it. Back to the fourth commandment, you start at the front of the commandment, Shabbat, and remember the Sabbath. You, your sons, and your daughters, and all within your house shall be one with God, not or don't. Then the next two symbols probably mean labor. And then we've got these two symbols, which I do not know, and then the symbol called. And as I look at the symbol called, I'm thinking, well, maybe it's, what is the Sabbath called? Using some Hebrew chiasm or chiasmus. So what is the Sabbath called? And as I thought about it, I referenced the 10 Commandments, and in both the Book of Mosiah and Exodus, they both say the same thing. Wherefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and hallowed it. So I penciled those in, blessed and hallowed. I brought it to the Tower of Babel stone, and now I read the Hebrews were called blessed. Why is it that the Hebrews were called blessed? It is actually a Jewish tradition where they believe that the Hebrew language was not confounded at the Tower of Babel. And in this case, it seems to make sense. In fact, I believe that these artifacts back up that notion believed by many Jewish people that the Hebrew language was not confounded at the tower. For that is why the Hebrews who are on the top of the tower are raising their arms, because they are glad that their language was not confounded. HVAV is at the top of the plate because that this is referring to the Hebrews. We have, once again, it says Babel, and then the righteous were remembered. The righteous were remembered by God, so he did not confound their language because of their righteousness. Now let's go back to the fourth commandment, And I'm supposing that these say you, your sons, and your daughters. Take a quick look at the fifth commandment. I'm not asking you to memorize it. I just want to show it to you. Honor that which is called your blessed father and called your blessed mother. Now, this next artifact was actually the artifact that got us all started here, because someone posted this on Facebook, and as the group was discussing what this tablet represented, the general consensus of the group was that the person in the middle, the picture in the middle, was actually King Solomon making his judgment regarding two women who were fighting over who was the proper mother of the child. Now, regarding the top of the tablet, I actually believe that this tablet is simply just a teaching tool for school teachers to teach the children how to read this language. And the top is really just outlaying the different symbols that are used in their alphabet and giving them some basic vocabulary so that they can in turn read this tablet and probably the other one or two tablets which go along with it, because the story is not complete with the bottom. Let's read what it says in 1 Kings. Then came there two women that were harlots unto the king and stood before him. And the one woman said, O my lord, I and this woman dwell in one house, and I was delivered of a child with her in the house. And it came to pass that the third day after that I was delivered, that this woman was delivered also, and we were together. There was no stranger with us in the house, save we two in the house. And this woman's child died in the night because she overlaid it. And she arose at midnight and took my son from beside me, while thine handmaid slept, and laid it in her bosom, and laid her dead child in my bosom. And when I arose in the morning to give my child suck, behold, it was dead. But when I considered it in the morning, behold, it was not my son, which I did bear. Well, let's see if we could read the bottom section. And the first symbol is actually the symbol of Cham. It's a phonetic CH, followed by a shepherd's hook, which I believe references king. And while it may sound reaching, just remember how we say Solomon today may very likely be very different from how Solomon was pronounced many years ago. In fact, the ancient Hebrew variant of the name Solomon is Shlomo. And for some reason, these people writing these tablets seem to be using a phonetic CH for his name. It may sound reaching, but just go with me. The next symbol, we've got Hukah, which is an Egyptian symbol, which means ruler. The symbol of the orange, I believe, may be the Egyptian symbol, which means to attend to. And so taking the first four symbols together, I believe what it is saying here, while King Solomon was attending to his duties as a ruler over the people of God, the red arrow, and then I have this elongated bird. And once again, the first thing I'm thinking when I saw people of God here, I'm thinking, well, King Solomon, he wasn't a Nephite, so maybe the Israelites were also considered the people of God. Now let's take a look at the Merneptah Stele. Now, back in 1896, the Merneptah Stele was discovered underground. It is currently housed in the Egyptian Museum in Cairo. There are not very many places in all of the ancient Egyptian writings that include the name Israel. However, this is one of them. It might be the only one, in fact. As you can see here, we have, well, maybe you can't see because you don't know how to read Egyptian, but everything to the right of the bird is phonetics. The double feathers make up the Y sound. The line with the circle in it is an S sound. The mouth symbol is an R sound, and then the single feather is either an A or an I. At least that is what the Egyptologists believe it is, and that spells out Isuri. The elongated bird is not a phonetic L. What the elongated bird is it is something called a determinative. Now, to describe to you what a determinative, take a look down below where you see the symbol, the Ankh symbol. Now, the Ankh symbol is actually a determinative, and if a person from Egypt were to fully write out the symbol of the word Ankh, they would start with the water symbol of the phonetic N and the circle below the phonetic N, which is a K, giving you an N and a K, or Ankh. And then you would place the determinative next to it. The determinative is a hint symbol. And as you could see with the Ankh symbol, the hint symbol of this determinative could stand alone and have the full meaning of it. So whether or not the Egyptians include the phonetics depended on how much space they have and whether or not it fit well within the artistry of the drawing. And so sometimes they would include one of the phonetics, sometimes two or three or more of the phonetics, followed by the determinative. The amount of phonetics included was up to the author to determine. So you could very well conclude that the elongated bird, being a determinative, could stand alone to mean Israel. And I found it very interesting that exactly in the spot where I'm expecting to find the word Israel, I find an elongated bird. It is not exactly the same. The one on the Michigan tablets has a cup neck as opposed to being skinny as it is on the Merneptah Stele one. The Merneptah Stele. Okay. So now I have, while King Solomon was attending to his duties as a ruler over the people of God in Israel, he made a righteous ruling regarding the gray arrow, a woman, and the red and the blue together, making up the word mother. So regarding a woman and a mother. And these two women, I have the symbol other here, duplicated, and their backs are up against each other. And I actually think that that is exactly what it means, is that these two women had their backs up against each other. The gray symbol means sun. Regarding the sun, the unrighteous, and then back to the second line, the unrighteous mother. And you'll notice that you could see the bird next to the word mother. You've got the orange arrow pointing down at the bird symbol. And if you're wondering why the bird is there, just take a quick look and see how it's used in Egyptian. It's kind of like a sentence structure article that means the one who. So the unrighteous mother is the one who, number one, not. Number two, remember. Not remember. She forgot. She forgot something. That's very interesting. It doesn't say anything in 1 Kings about her forgetting anything. I look at number three, the symbol there, and when I first saw that, I thought it looked like a blanket flying in the wind. And as I look at it more closely, I'm thinking, well, maybe that's how the mothers prepared or wrapped their baby at night. So they have a newborn baby. Perhaps this is the way they bundled the babies. Well, next to the bundled baby, the symbol at number 4, you have a hilltop, and above the hilltop you have a small nail representing the small child, and then an inverse of the hilltop pressing down on the child. She overlaid it. So she forgot to bundle her baby, and she overlaid it. Next, I find the symbol earth and a Greek omega. Now I'm thinking, well, perhaps this means died, and I could see how the symbol, a Greek omega, could potentially mean died. I mean, it is the last letter of the Greek alphabet. It means end. But my real question was, why earth? Referencing the Book of Mormon, 2 Nephi 1:14, Lehi is speaking, a few more days and I go the way of all the earth. Mosiah 1:9, and he saw that he must very soon go the way of all the earth. King Mosiah, having gone all the way of the earth, Teancum, but behold, he was dead and had gone all the way of the earth. And lastly, Pahoran had died and gone the way of all the earth. I don't think there's any question as to why earth is used in this context. As King Solomon attended to the duties of the ruler over the people of God in Israel, he made a righteous judgment regarding a mother and another woman, and they had aught against each other. Regarding the son, the unrighteous mother forgot to bundle her baby, and as a result overlaid the child. The child died and went the way of the earth. Okay, now some of the symbols in the Michigan tablets are very similar to items that you will find in the writings of the Ojibwe. In around 1850 or in the 1850s, Ojibwe chief George Copeway wrote a book on the Ojibwe nation. It was a very interesting historical book, and in it he told us that they had a system of writing that was made up of about 200 symbols, and they would use it for general correspondence between the different tribes. He gave us 60 of the symbols. And as you notice on the second page, towards the bottom, you've got a symbol for stand. Right up above it, you've got walked or passed. And so the foot with the toes open is walked. You got the hand, meaning did so. When they spoke, they drew a line proceeding from the mouth, or when they drew see, the line was proceeding from the eyes. I thought it was very interesting as I saw this tablet because I saw what I thought were correlations to the Ojibwe writings. The yellow line, well, not really related to the Ojibwe here, remembering the days of chaos when righteousness prevailed over wickedness. At least that's what I think that means. With the red arrow, this just, it was almost funny to me as we were doing family scripture study one night and one of the children read out loud, and he walked after the ways of his father. And I couldn't help but wonder if that foot and the hand and the face was really just saying he walked after the ways of his father. Okay, now the book Indian Sign Language by William Tompkins, he gave us more symbols. The one I want to point out is the X, means trade. So let's look at the X a little bit more closely. I mean, it's actually found in the Egyptian language as well. It means to kill or to slaughter. As you can see in this one image, they're slaughtering the ox, and the X is for kill. The Sioux used it for trade. When we get to the next one of the next tablets, you will see that the X seems to actually take on both meanings. Then we've got the Egyptian symbol for give, and a variant to this Egyptian symbol found in the Michigan tablets, which I believe also means to give. Okay, now this symbol, we have a person that is sitting down. It looks like he's kneeling down, and he's possibly holding something in his hands, perhaps the dove for a sacrifice. Behind him, he's got a box that is emanating fire. We look at the top, and we've got an H for Hebrew, then the X and a torch and another X. I actually think that this means a Hebrew offering, a burnt offering to, and I'm expecting the word God here, but I have a little problem here. I see two horizontal symbols on the tooth comb symbol and a leg, which is not the meaning of God. However, I think the author made a mistake, and he realized his mistake, and he drew another line to the outside of the leg. So the number of strokes are proper to take on the meaning of the word God. So we have a Hebrew offering, a burnt offering to God. First fruits, Leviticus 23, 9 through 11. And the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, Speak unto the children of Israel, and say unto them, When ye be come into the land which I give unto you, and shall reap the harvest thereof, then ye shall bring a sheaf of the first fruits of your harvest unto the priest. And he shall wave the sheaf before the Lord to be accepted for you. On the morrow after the Sabbath, the priest shall wave it. So now we have a person who's on his knees, and he is offering the first fruits to the priest. The priest is holding the sheaf, probably waving it. And we look at the writings. What I see is giving the first fruits to gods. And now we have another word which must mean priest. And I find it very interesting that the word for priest is the symbol that is used for God, with two additional lines looking like a person holding his arm to the square, as though he is a priest performing a proper baptism, holding his right arm to the square. Okay, this next symbol, or this next image here, we have the box emanating fire. We have a person with his hands pointing towards the box. I look at the writings and it's kind of grainy. It's kind of hard to see it very well, but I think what it's saying is offering to speak the people of God. Now, what does that mean? What I actually think it means, I think it is reference to what it says in Alma 46:35. And it came to pass that whomsoever of the Amalekites that would not enter into a covenant to support the cause of freedom, that they might maintain a free government, he caused to be put to death. And there were but few who denied the covenant of freedom. And I think this person is taking the covenant to freedom. Now we have a beheading. And what I actually think this is saying is God being a witness. And then the next symbol you can't really see. It's too faded. You can't make out anything that's there. And I'm actually expecting the word not to be there, not called to the people of God. I actually believe that this image references a person who would not take up the cause of freedom. Therefore, he was put to death. Okay, now we have a Leviathan. Why do I think it's a Leviathan? Because David Allen Deal, he said it's a Leviathan. You could see an L in there. And then next to it looks somewhat like an E and a V. It's really hard to say to me, but if it really is saying Leviathan, then the arrow that I'm pointing to would likely be a phonetic A. So now this tablet here has 4 images. And we're going to look at each image individually. Okay, we have a person who is preaching. And notice above his head, it has the symbol of the phonetic A. Perhaps that is referencing to his name. No, we do not have a dark Sith Lord in this image. What we do have is recalling the writings of the Ojibwe. When a person was seeing something, the line came from the person's eyes. What I actually think this is I actually believe that this is Abinadi, and he is witnessing to the evil acts done by the hands of the wicked King Noah. Now, as we look at the writings below, the first symbol, remember, right to left, I actually, when I first saw it, I thought it was the water symbol, but as I look more closely and look at the context, I actually think it is the horned serpent symbol from Egyptian, which means he. And remembering the bird and how that uses in the sentence structure and a torch in between, he is the one who was burned. Then we have this vertical line, perhaps it means at the stake. He, and then phonetic A, as though is saying he, and then it's mentioning the person whose name starts with the phonetic A. The third symbol, or the third image, we have what I believe is Alma kneeling before an altar, and he is repenting of his sins. And you recall that Alma was one of the priests of the wicked King Noah, and he was forced to flee as he would not agree to the killing of Abinadi. Then the last image looks like destruction of a building. And this is what I believe it is if you recall when Ammon left Zarahemla to go seek out the people who had left several years before to go back to the land of Nephi. When Ammon got to the land of Nephi, he was taken prisoner. And when King Limhi learned of who he really was, he was glad, and he brought the people together to talk to the people, to address to them. And he reminded them about Abinadi and the words that Abinadi said. And he said, and again he saith, if my people shall sow filthiness, they shall reap the chaff thereof in the whirlwind, and the effect thereof is poison. Therefore the people in this town suffered a tornado. And again he saith, if my people shall sow filthiness, they shall reap the east wind, which bringeth immediate destruction. Now where they're at, if it's where we think it is for the land of Nephi, they were probably about 400 miles inland from the Atlantic Ocean. So they were probably too far away to receive the winds of a hurricane. However, a tropical storm that is a remnant of a hurricane that is breaking up, still bringing in horrible winds, is very plausible, very likely. And you could see the roof of the structure being ripped up in this picture here. And then King Limhi says, and now behold, The promise of the Lord is fulfilled, and ye are smitten and afflicted. So evidently the people, we know from the writings in the Book of Mormon that they were smitten and afflicted from the Lamanites. However, we don't usually put much focus on the weather and the horrible effects that the weather had them as a fulfillment to the prophecies given to them by Abinadi. Now, as we look at the two writings together, what I actually think we have here on the bottom is the name Abinadi completely spelled out. At least that is what I believe it is. It starts with the phonetic A, looking at the bottom, and then next to the third symbol looks like the water symbol, which is in Egyptian is a phonetic N, so it's possibly A, B, N, and then the last two symbols, it could be a D, I, or a ID. It really, we don't really know, but I think that actually is spelling out Abinadi. And next to the name Abinadi, you have the symbol that looks like the word of God proceeding forth from the mouth of a person, preached. The Egyptian bird, he is the one who preached. I actually think that the symbol that looks like a backwards 3, it might actually be a derivation of the Egyptian owl, which means in, and it is being used as a preposition. So Abinadi, he is the one who preached in, and what city did he preach in? It was the city of Nephi. This next image, you have a person lying down. He's surrounded by people. Well, that could be anything, right? Well, let's look at the top line. We have phonetic A, followed by a scrawny bird. And just look below and see how the Ojibwe and the Egyptians defined a scrawny bird. Followed by the symbol for sun. What I see here is the son, Alma the Younger, was smitten by God and was given, just below the H, I see a symbol that I don't know. And if I were to know what it was, my guess is that it probably means angel, which spoke to him the words which caused him to fall. And the symbol for fall is an ancient Hebrew tzadeh. Once again, a legitimate Hebrew symbol being used in these writings. You see at the top here, we have a whole bunch of birds. And what I actually believe that this is symbolizing is Alma drinking of the dregs of the bitter cup. And you could see how the cup just seems to change as though the bird is struggling and struggling with the cup. And then at the very end, the cup is gone, indicating that Alma has repented of his sins. Now, is it possible, or maybe just possible, that on the right, where it has the 4 A symbols, that it actually means Alma, Ammon, Aaron, Omner, and Himni? Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. Now, this image I included mostly because ever since I saw the word temple in my Egyptian book, I kept wondering if I was going to find the word temple in the Michigan tablets. And I think I found it here. In the middle rectangle, I see he made a temple to two symbols that I don't know: God, other, unrighteous, called. He made a temple to a false god. That's what I see here. Also notice on the Egyptian symbol where the flag does not mean temple. It's the rectangle that means temple. I also notice that the person to the left, he seems to be receiving the full glory of the sun, whereas the person on the right, presumably the person who built the temple to a false god, he is receiving the glory of the moon. Language summary. Minimalistic vocabulary. Shorthand commonly uses only the first sound of the word. Uses ancient Egyptian, ancient Hebrew, and Native American symbols and symbols of their own creation. The tablets are commonly used with pictures, probably for the purpose of passing on oral traditions. I have a couple of verses from the Book of Mormon I'd like to read. Mormon chapter 9, and now behold, we have written this record according to our knowledge, in the characters which are called among us the reformed Egyptian, being handed down and altered by us according to our manner of speech. And if our plates had been sufficiently large, we should have written in Hebrew. But the Hebrew hath been altered by us also. And if could have written in Hebrew, behold, you would have had no imperfection in our record. And then in Ether 12, Moroni speaking, and I said unto him, Lord, the Gentiles will mock at these things because of our weakness in writing. For Lord, thou hast made us mighty in word by faith, but thou hast not made us mighty in writing. For thou hast made all this people that they could speak much because of the Holy Ghost, which thou hast given them. And thou hast made us that we could write but little because of the awkwardness of our hands. Behold, thou hast not made us mighty in writing, like unto the brother of Jared. For thou madest him that the things which he wrote were mighty, even as thou art, unto the overpowering of man to read them. Thou hast also made our words powerful and great, even that we cannot write them. Wherefore, when we write, we behold our weakness, and stumble because of the placing of our words. And I fear lest the Gentiles shall mock at our words. And when I had said this, the Lord spake unto me, saying, Fools mock, but they shall mourn, and my grace is sufficient for the meek, that they shall take no advantage of your weakness. And if men come unto me, I will show unto them their weakness. I give unto men weakness, that they may be humble. And my grace is sufficient for all men that humble themselves before me. For if they humble themselves before me, and have faith in me, then will I make weak things become strong unto them. I only included this last verse as it is my favorite verse in all of the Book of Mormon, in fact, of all of the scriptures. In conclusion, James Talmage, he was a mountain of a man and a thorough research. However, the study of this language indicates that the artifacts are indeed ancient. James Scotford could not have created such a language. If he was engaged in fraud, it likely was not to the extent believed by Elder Talmage. I would also like to say that further linguistic analysis is needed, preferably by the academic arms of the church. Thank you for listening to my presentation. Good day.